Okay, so this is going to be a video on how to customize your user interface. So if you're a bit new to Eve and you've been wondering how to customize everything in exacting detail, then you're in the right place. We're going to just jump right into it here, getting started. So the first thing we want to do is set the scale. The scale controls the overall appearance of everything. It's currently set at 100%. Now if you're on a smaller monitor like I am using a laptop, then you may want to push the scale up a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to see everything, especially some of the fonts and some of the smaller text. On the other hand, if you're already on a larger monitor, maybe a 24-inch or larger, you may want to actually bring the scaling down a bit. To adjust the scaling, just hit Escape, and under the Display and Graphics tab, you'll see the option right here for UI scaling. Currently set at 100%. I'm going to go ahead and change mine to 125%, and then click Apply. And you can immediately see that everything is already somewhat larger. I'll go ahead and close the window, and you can see that the Neocom menu is larger, and we have a little bit of collision here as a result of changing the scale. So scale is definitely the first thing you want to change because we're going to be resizing windows and moving things around, and it's good to start with a good foundation. Now if you're straight in or out of the tutorial, you may have noticed that the zoom function seems to be reversed using the scroll wheel on your mouse. So if you can fix that by hitting Escape again, and again under Display and Graphics, then you'll see an option here to invert zoom direction. If you click that, then that should fix it for you. Let's see, as long as we're here, we're going to go ahead and, well actually we won't, I'll show you this first. There is another item that will help you to see some of the smaller text. So for example, if I right click on the ship, you see the context menu. The context menu here is, it's not too bad since we've already adjusted the scale, but you can make this somewhat larger if you want. You can do that with Escape, and I think this is under General Settings and Context Menu Font Size. So if you want to make that a little bit larger, then you can select one of these fonts here. You can also make it a little bit smaller if you like. So now if I right click again on my ship, you can see that the font is slightly larger. You can also adjust the darkness or brightness. For me, this is just a little bit too dark. The colors are saturated really well, but I am going to brighten it up just a little bit. So I'll hit Escape again, and then under Display and Graphics, and then this little button right here, Brightness. Click it, and then you can adjust it. You can make it darker if you'd like. I usually like to go right about here, just above the far end of the reset button, something like that. And then save it, close the window, and this works well for me. I also like to adjust the camera shake. If you hit Escape, Display and Graphics, you'll see, I actually already have it disabled already, but there's a camera shake option and a camera bobbing. The camera shake, as you can read, toggle the camera shaking when warping and when your ship is hit. I find it to be a little bit of a distraction when I experience camera shake, especially when getting hit by a weapon, so I like to disable that. It keeps me a little bit more focused. I do keep camera bobbing on. This gives your ship just a slight up and down movement when you're stationary in space, and I do like that effect, so I'm going to leave that as is. Next up is the transparency. So the transparency is fine for my personal taste, but I'll go ahead and show you how to change it anyway, just in case you want to. It's Escape, and you can actually see an example of transparency right here. There's a little bit of a blur behind it. You can also adjust that, but I'm just going to show you transparency for now. I believe it's under General Settings, and then it's over here, Window Transparency. It's set at 100. If I decrease it all the way down, you can see it completely removes the transparency. So you can adjust it however you like. I like to keep it at 100% though. Next up is the chat window. So this is very much like Windows. You have your Neocom, which can be compared to your taskbar. Then you have Windows, and just like in Windows, you can resize everything. You can simply move your mouse over any edge or any corner, and then left click and drag it around to resize it. So I'm going to resize my chat box to something like that maybe, and then I'm going to also drag it down here to the far corner. There is a snap to feature with these windows, so if you bring it close to an edge and then release the mouse, it'll snap right over to the edge. There's also a snap away from feature, and if you bring it just far enough out, it'll snap it out to a preset distance. So I can come down here, for example, and have an equal distance on both sides around it. Some people like to have a gap around the outside of their windows. As for me, I prefer it to be flush, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Now you can also adjust all of your individual chat tabs. You start off with local core chat and rookie help. And rookie help is, you can't really get rid of this. You can right click on the tab and then close it. However, you're going to be stuck in rookie help for the first 30 days. So if you relog and you log back in, you're going to find rookie chat or rookie help chat back again. So each individual chat will have its own settings. So just because I'm going to adjust settings for local does not mean it's going to adjust settings for everything. So I'm going to start with changing this over here. I'm going to use core chat as an example instead, since there's actually some chat going on in here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this. You can just click here and move it over, something like that. I don't like seeing the larger player icons in here, so I'm going to get rid of those. You can find the option for these, I think, here. It says show member list. We do want to see the member list, but I want them to be small, so I'm going to select show compact member list. Doing this allows for me to see the name, and most importantly, it allows for me to see the status of the player in relation to myself. So this lets me quickly see if there is a suspect or a criminal, an enemy, or a friend. In this case, the icon you're seeing here indicates that they're in my same corporation. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the font size here as well. I like it to be quite a bit larger. So you can find that option here on the gear. And then font size, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up to 14. And as you can see, everything is much larger. Let me go ahead and adjust this slightly. I think we'll go right about there. Might bring it up a little bit more too. You can also adjust the panel that you type in simply by clicking here and adjusting it. I'll leave it right about there. For rookie help, I recommend you turn off the most recent users, because there's so many people in rookie chat anyway. There's over 1,000 people in here that this can get pretty busy. So you go here, and instead of selecting show compact member list, we're just going to go ahead and remove it. So now it's gone all together. I will leave the player icons here though, and I will also adjust the font size to the same as the other, 14. So something like this works well for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and adjust the local chat as well, 14, and I'll minimize these. Something like that. I don't necessarily need to see the full name of everyone. I'm just interested in seeing these icons right here. Now there is another feature of chat that is often ignored that I'll bring to your attention, and they are filters. You can set filters to omit words, and you can also set filters to highlight words. And I believe the option is here under the gear, and then it says set word filters. If you click this, then you'll see up here you can enter words that you want to omit. They basically mask the words, so you'll see asterisks instead of the word that you type in. And then down here are words that you want to highlight, so separated by commas. So, for example, I'll just put in comma, and just a few words just to give you a sample of what it looks like, and then click Save. And now if I click the tab, it should reset it, and now you can see some green highlighting going on here because those were the words I chose. Now, most people choose to use their own name, so if someone has mentioned your name, then it will stand out a little bit, even though it's pretty common also to simply drag someone's name down into chat to highlight it. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and reset that back now. Word filters, and then I'm just going to remove them, save, and if I click this again, it resets it again. Okay, next is the Neocom. This is the Neocom. It's basically a location for quick launch icons that can bring up various services and windows. So everything in here is completely customizable, and you can add more things and you can delete things. So for example, I don't use Project Discovery, so I'm going to remove it simply by right-clicking on it and then selecting Remove. I'm also going to remove the New Eden Store by doing the same. I'm going to leave the help there, journal, wallet. I'm going to remove personal assets. You may notice it also shows you the hotkey when you mouse over, Alt-T. So this is a pretty common one that people use, and I rarely need to click the icon. I'll just usually press Alt-T. So I'll go ahead and remove that as well. I'll leave the ship tree in there, mainly because there isn't a hotkey for it. Fleet, I'm going to remove the core icon, and we'll leave industry, market, fitting, mail, people, places, inventory. This represents your chat. This is always going to be present. There's no option to remove it. However, you can place it somewhere else. I don't like it on the top, so if you left click and hold, then you can, oh, it's not letting me drag. I must have my Neocom locked. I'll unlock it real quick. If you right click here, anywhere on the Neocom, then you have some other options that will pop up. So now that it's unlocked, I'm just going to left click and then drag this down to the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and move my wallet up here just underneath my inventory. So I'll have inventory, wallet, mail, people, and places. I think that's the way I want it set up. I'm also going to add a couple of items. You can find the full menu here. Just click, and then you'll see some various options as well as a hierarchy of other items. I specifically want to add my notepad, which is right here. So you can either click here and open your notepad, or you can drag it to the Neocom. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it just above my journal, I think. So now if I click here, it brings it up as well. I'm also going to add contracts, which is under business, contracts, and then over here at the bottom, or near the bottom. If you're really trying to squeeze as much screen real estate as you can set the Neocom to auto hide. You just right click and then turn on auto hide, and then when you're not using it, it makes it vanish, and when you bring your mouse over, it'll slide it back over. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and leave it always active. And you can also set to disable blink. Not everything here will blink, but if I get a new email, then the email icon will blink, and if there is a new transaction, then the wallet icon will also blink. So you can disable that if you like. And I think the last thing we'll do on here is I will go ahead and lock it. Oh, actually, let me show you one more thing. Let me unlock it. You can also resize the Neocom by mousing over the edge, and then you can simply drag if you want to make the icons larger or smaller. I'll leave it right about there. And you can also move this to the right. Just click Align Right, and then it pops it over to the right side. But I prefer it on the left, so I'll bring it back over. Right click and lock. And once it's locked, you can't accidentally move it or resize it or accidentally drag anything off of it. Alright, so what we have left is this area over here, which we're going to cover when we undock, and then the station's services window. This too is resizable and movable. Simply left click anywhere in here and you can drag it around. I like to bring it up flush to the corner and all the way down and a bit wider, like maybe right about there. I also like to add a hangar in here. Ordinarily, if you wanted to see your ships, you would click on your inventory and then on your ship hangar, and it will show you all of the ships that are available to you. However, I like to have the ship hangar over here. I find it a lot more convenient. So to do that, hit escape, and let's see, it's under general settings, and under station you'll see the option merge items and ships into the station panel. Select that and then close the window, and now you'll see we have an extra button over here for hangars. So if you click this, you'll see your ships. There's also a sub tab on here. You can switch over to your items. I like this resize so that there's 4 columns. So almost there. There we go. 4 columns. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and dock. That's as far as we're going to go for being docked. And so now we have a different view. Some of the items are the same. We still have our chat, we still have our Neocom, and we still have this area up here. But in addition, we also have the selected item window, the overview, and the drones window. So we're going to go ahead and cover all of these items right now. Starting with the radial menu. You probably noticed during the tutorial that if you clicked and you held your click for a little bit too long, intentional or not, you would get a radial menu. I find this to be more annoying than useful. So if I'm trying to left click to change my view and I left click for just a little bit too long, then I end up with a radial menu instead. So I find myself having to specifically look for a spot in space in order to do it instead. The radial menu can be useful. It also works when you click on an item. You left click and hold and the radial menu will come up with various options. However, the same options appear here under the selected item menu or window. So this is how I prefer to interact with objects rather than the radial menu. So I'm going to, it's not quite disabling the radial menu because that option is not present. However, we can map it to a different button, and that will prevent me from having to deal with it. You can do that by hitting escape and again the general settings tab, and you'll see an option here, open radial menu with, and I never really use the middle mouse button, so I'm just going to select it and then close the window. And now as a test, I'll left click the station and no radial menu is coming up, and I can adjust my view. So that's the effect that I was looking for. Okay, now for these 3 windows, I usually like to have them adjusted so that the overview is flush to the right and coming down to right about there and to maybe there, maybe a little bit further out, something like that. Roughly the same size as the station services. And then for the drones, I'll let it snap to the edge over here and there, and then I'll bring it down flush with the bottom of the screen. So I have my overview and drones. Now I've only got a couple of drones right now, and it may look like I have a lot of excess space, but we're going to be using this space for more stuff as well. So for now I'm going to leave it as is. And for the selected item, I usually like to leave it right here, and that way when I select something, then I have my options for how I want to interact with it right there, sort of in front of me. And if we target something, those targets will appear here. So for example, oh, these guys might be too far away. I'll target a couple of guys here, and you see they're going to appear here, and they'll continue to target across the screen based upon your skills and the ship that you're in. I'm going to detarget them. Okay, a little bit of lag maybe. Okay, so I want to talk about the overview a little bit. There are quite a few dedicated videos to covering nothing but the overview, so this isn't going to be too exhaustive, but I do want to cover it in a little bit, so you can get the basics of it, and so you can make some edits and customizations if you wish. The first thing you may notice is it may be pretty crowded with a lot of stuff in here, and you may see a lot of useless stuff in here that's not really benefiting you. Also note that there are 3 tabs by default: General, Mining, and Warp 2. So you may notice that these little things appear in each one of the tabs. So there is a real easy way to adjust what you can see on the fly. So you can do that simply by choosing the tab that you want to edit, and then right-clicking any object that you don't want to see, and then selecting to remove it. So now we're no longer seeing that. We will still see it in General and Warp 2, unless we also remove it from them individually, which I'll do right now. I'm going to go ahead and remove these scanner probes here too, because they seem to be taking up a lot of space. And so now we have a lot cleaner look, a lot less clutter. You can easily add an item that you've removed as well, especially if you can see it in space. So, for example, I've removed all of these things. These are mobile depots, by the way, and they're used mostly for people to advertise. They're kind of like billboards, or you could refer to them as mobile billboards. I find them more of a nuisance than anything else, so I usually remove them. However, if you want to see them, select the tab in which you want to see them, and then right-click one, and then click to Add Mobile Depot to Overview. And then they're back again. So this works with anything that you can click in space, including ships, and you can see there's some more over here. I don't know if there's any more of those probe scanners around for me to show you as an example or not, but it would work the same way if you could click on one of those, and then you can right-click and choose to add it. Okay, let's see what's next here. Now, you can also customize this further. You can add more tabs. You can also add and customize your columns here. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. Actually, I don't think I need to adjust these much. I think they're already set. If you wanted to, though, you can simply click the little divider between each of the columns and then drag to resize that particular column. I think this is actually a retained setting from a previous save of mine. So I'll go something right about there, so I have a little bit of space for distance, name, and type. And I have some unused space over here, so I'm going to go ahead and add a column to it. So to customize, to add a column, just click here and then choose Open Overview Settings. And then in this window, you'll notice quite a few options. The one we want is the columns. Actually, I'll move this over here, make this a little bit bigger. And you can see that it's already has selected icon, distance, name, and type. And we can see that over here. Icon, distance, name, and type. And I'm going to add velocity, so that way I can see how fast other players are moving. So just click, and you can see it immediately pops up. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust this as well. You may notice that the actual values are cut off. That's because I don't have the column size set correctly for the frame size. So I'm going to go ahead and expand the frame. That way I can see the edge of the column, and then I'm going to bring it into right about there, and then I can bring the frame back over. Leave a little bit of a gap here on the side for your scroll bar, because once you have a lot of items in here, you'll be scrolling to view everything. Although you don't have to use the scroll bar, you can simply use your scroll wheel as well. And move this back over here. So, alright, there we go. Something like that. Actually, we've made it slightly smaller than it was before, but I think it's fine. We'll go ahead and adjust it to make it a little bit smaller as well, then I'll bring this over. And you can see it's I still have that item that I had selected earlier, so it's still selected in the item selection window with details. Okay, you can also add more tabs, and you can also edit tabs here. So to add a tab, you would simply go to your overview tabs here, and you can see it already says General Mining and Warp 2, and that corresponds with General Mining and Warp 2 here. So I'm going to add one for drones, so I'm going to name it drones, and then over here I'm going to use a preset, and I'm going to use the drones preset. That makes it pretty easy. And if you look over here, you'll notice that it's already added. There's nothing to save, nothing to submit. So now if I click on drones, we would see any drones that are in space. I'll drag my drones out right now, and then you'll see them pop up here. And there's my 2 drones. And if anyone else has a drones tab and showing drones within the tab, then they will also see my drones over here, even if they couldn't see them over here near to me. I'm going to do Shift R to recall my drones. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and add some more information in here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull my drones back out. And let's say that for whatever reason, I want to see drones and planets. So we'll pull this up, open Overview Settings. And as long as the Drones tab is selected, then any changes that we make over here are going to be added to this tab only. So make sure that you have the correct tab selected that you wish to make changes to. So this is this tab presets tab shows you all of the optional things that you can choose to display in the overview, and there are a lot of them. So planets are under celestial, and these are in alphabetical order, so I can just scroll down to the P's and then click on planet, and then now we also see planets over here. So my drones and planets. I can deselect it here to remove it, or I could still do it this way, right click and then remove. Okay, I'm going to recall my drones. Now you can spend a lot of time customizing your tabs and columns and overview in general, but you can also copy an overview that someone else has already created, and it's a huge time saver, and there's quite a few good overviews out there. If you happen to know the name of the user, a lot of people will save their overviews as a link on their bio. So I'll give you an example on how to do that right now. So we're going to go ahead and open up People and Places, or Alt-E, and then we're going to do a search for Pilot Iryhor, Iryhor, and then you can just click search, and it says it's found one match and it's a player, and then you can simply double click this and you'll open up the info panel for that player. You can then close these, and I'm going to go ahead and resize this, something like that. And if you look down here at the bottom, you notice that this user is offering his overview. Iryhor's default plus overview with ship label. The ship label is a nice bonus. Here, let me explain ship labels real quick. If I can find a... so here's another pilot or capsuleer right here. And if I mouse over their ship, you see we can see their name, the type of ship that they're flying, and how far they are from us. And this is pretty basic looking. An NPC readout will look the same, and sometimes it's a little difficult to tell the difference between a player and an NPC. So let me click on this guy. But however, when you click on someone and then look in the selected item window, if you see a ship and a player icon, then you know it's a player. However, a ship label usually adds a bit of decoration to the ship, and it makes it a lot easier to identify player ships very quickly, which can be pretty convenient, especially for a player versus player. So you're going to get the overview and the ship label with this. It's very simple. It's just a one-click install. There are some other overviews that are quite extravagant, and there's quite a bit of installation required. One of the things I like about this one is it is very simple yet very effective. It also tells you how to reset your overview. It's a good idea if you're going to use someone else's overview to reset yours before you do, and that will prevent a little bit of data corruption, especially if you're using someone else's overview. And it tells you to reset your overview, open your overview options. Actually, I think he means overview settings, which is right here. And he says go to the miscellaneous tab and then reset. So you would go miscellaneous and then reset. I'm not going to reset it because I want to leave what I have in there now, and I haven't really made any significant changes to require a reset. To install this overview, all you do is click it. It'll ask you, are you sure? Yes. And if you look up here, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different. We see a little bit of color up here. The font is a little bit larger. We have several additional tabs. We have a general tabs, an asteroids tab, drones, loot, ships. I specifically like the ships tab. It's very useful. It only shows you other player ships, not NPCs, and also scanner probes, which indicates that there is a player nearby. So maybe you can't see the player, but you can see the scanner probe, so you know there's a player nearby. And then PvP is the same. It will show you ships, but it will also show you player structures like citadels, player-owned stations. It won't show you the common things like the spammy, for example, the spammy billboards. It won't show you these. But if you wanted to see these in addition, you could easily add it. So it's kind of nice to grab someone else's overview, and then if you see something about it that you don't like, you can do minor tweaks here and there. And there is a warp 2. This is actually just called warp. But what this really is, it's a safety net. The idea here is if you're involved in player versus player combat and you need a quick escape, then you simply click over to warp, and then you could warp to any one of these locations. You would just click and then hit S, or you could go up here and click this button to warp to it. And actually, I just realized that there's a station appearing on the warp field, and I don't want stations. I like it to just display planets and moons, which is the way it is right now. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And so now I've customized that overview slightly for my own personal needs. And this is a pretty good rookie overview in my opinion. You may want to change it later. You also don't have to get married to just one overview. You can save links to your own overview as well. And then maybe there's one scenario in which you want to use overview A, and then another situation in which you prefer overview B. And you can simply go in, reset, install the new overview. It only takes a few seconds. Okay, so we're going to look at this area now. We have some hotkeys in here, and this is commonly referred to as your cap or capacitor. More specifically, this area in here represents your capacitor only, but as a unit, this is usually referred to as a cap. A lot of this is customizable. You can move these things around. If you just left click and then hold and then drag, you can move items around. So if I want to move the afterburner over here, then I can. You can also group weapons. Now these are minors, so they can't be grouped. So there's no group icon option here. But with combat weapons you can, as long as they're the same type of weapon. You can also drag and drop on top to group them that way as well. And you see it's giving me a warning message here, letting me know that it's only good for particular types of launchers and turrets. Now, placement of these icons is more than just looks or convenience for clicking. And that's because you have 3 racks here. This is your high rack, your mid rack, and your low rack. And you can overload a rack, and by overloading it, you get a little bit extra power out of it. So if I wanted a speed boost, I could overload this rack to get a speed boost. When you overload a rack, you essentially overheat it, and over time you can burn it up. It's possible to burn up your modules in one run, depending on how long you've overloaded the rack for. So when you overload a rack, if I decide to overload the mid rack, it will overload every item in the mid rack. So you may want to give some thought to the placement of your modules in regards to overloading items. And these are all active modules, which means you have to click them to use them. There are also lots of passive modules, and there's an option to make them invisible, and you may be tempted to do that. But if you're new, I recommend you leave them enabled just so you can get used to remembering what modules you have installed on your ship, and also get used to rack placement for the purposes of overloading. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to add a display tag for all of these things. This represents the health of your ship, starting with the outside ring, which is for shield. The mid ring represents your armor, and the innermost ring represents your structure of your ship itself. And as you can see here, they're all at 100%, and we can see the value as well: 259 shield, 201 armor, 230 structure. However, you can get a readout of this that's always present regardless of whether or not you've moused over it. That option is found here, and you can just select right here, display readout, and then it will show you 100% for all of these. Now, I like to deselect readout as a percentage, and by doing that, I can see the actual values associated with my ship. And as you've probably already noticed, when you take damage, you'll see these white bars go down and they will be replaced with red, and when they're all red, then you're dead. You can also customize where you want this entire area to appear. You can keep it down here on the bottom, or you can bring it up to the top. If you go to options, I think there's an option in here somewhere. Let's see. Here it is, HUD align to top. If you click this, then it will bring it up to the top. I'm going to go ahead and deselect it and bring it back down. You can also left click here and move it left or right. You can't bring it up or down, but you can slide it left or right, something like that. To get it back in the center, if you're in the area, it'll snap in there. So if you're not sure exactly what is dead center, just play with it a little bit and it'll snap dead center if that's what you like. Now, some people like to bring this over to the side more. The reason being is because there is quite a bit of room here, and you may have lots of modules listed. So some people like to bring it over a little bit further so that the entire unit is centered. If you're just starting out though, you're probably not going to have a lot of modules displaying. Okay, so there are quite a few additional options in here. Most of them are pretty obvious and self-explanatory. I do want to go over one though: configure ship health alert settings. This is one that for the most part gets ignored, but it's extremely useful. This allows you to control when you get an audible alarm. So you've probably noticed that when your shield goes down, at some point you get an alarm. In this case, it's set at 25%. So that means when your shield is down to 25%, which is roughly here, you will receive an alarm. The armor will alarm at 40%, the hull at 95%, and your capacitor or your energy at 30%. You can also disable these and then re-enable them, and when you re-enable them, you will hear the sound that you can expect to hear when you're given the alarm. So I like to set my shield at 75%, and what this does is it gives me an early warning when I'm being attacked. So if I'm not paying attention, or I look away for a minute and I'm getting attacked, as soon as my shield is right about there, I'm going to hear an alarm, and that's going to get my attention. The armor I like to set at right about 50%, so I'm going to bring that up. So if I'm not paying attention and I don't realize that my armor has been falling, then at the very least I'll know at the halfway point. For hull, I do like to know early, but not quite that early, so I'm going to say 90%. And if it's hit your hull, unless you have a lot of hull, and I don't, I only have 230 on my humble venture, then you're pretty much a goner anyway. unless you have a much larger ship with a lot more hull. So I'm going to leave it there. So 75% for shield, 50 for armor, 90 for hull, and I'll leave capacitor at 30. You can also receive an alarm for cargo, so that will sound once your cargo hull is getting too full. I'm going to leave it disabled though. Now the last thing with regard to cap are, you'll notice some icons over here. Here's one to open your cargo hold, but we already can do the same thing over here. So for the most part, I tend to ignore most of these. I use the hotkeys for these anyway. However, I would like to bring your attention to the tactical overlay. You can either click this or press Ctrl D as indicated, and this will bring up a sort of a template surrounding your ship that helps you get a visual of your position. As you can see here, this makes it much easier to see that I'm just above the station, or hovering just above it, and I'm just about center of this area right here. These numbers indicate kilometers, so I can see how far away something is. This red dashed line right here indicates my targeting distance. So it looks like it's about maybe 16 kilometers, maybe approximately. That's how far away I can target objects. So, so for example, this guy is 47 kilometers. So if I try to target him, it gives me a warning. It says 15 kilometers. So I was pretty close. I guess that's 15, not 16. Also, if you mouse over your weapons or your miners, it will also show you the distance at which you can target or shoot at these things as well. So in this case, it would be asteroids. If these were combat weapons, then it would be the distance that I could shoot at other players or rats. So this is very useful. And you'll notice something here. You notice these people undocking, and I'll zoom in here. We can get a perspective by actually, let me switch over to ships only. We can see their position relative to us in the arrow indicating the direction they're moving in, and you can see that guy just bumped into me a little bit. And you can also see an arrow with my ship indicating the direction that I'm moving. It's very convenient. This also shows you the position of other objects. Anything that is appearing over here will have a line attached to it. So if I switch to warp, those lines disappear because nothing that's here is currently visible that's appearing in the overview. But if I go back to the ships, it's a different case. So this guy, we can see where he is relative to me, pointing an arrow over here at me. We can see the direction he's moving. His arrow is going now. We can see he's moving down. I think he just docked. And it's very convenient. It also shows you the direction you're moving as well. And this makes it very convenient. So let's say I wanted to move across space here, but I didn't want to move up or down. I can simply align it. And I may not be able to do that if I didn't have the overlay. So for example, I'll do Control D. And now I'm just going to try to eyeball it. And I'm just going to try to position here. And then I'm going to guess that that's straight across. So if I double click in space, I'll now start to move forward. There's not a lot of indication that I'm moving forward though. We can look down here and see that I'm moving forward, and now we have engine thrust. I'm going to re-enable the tactical overlay, and we can see I was off by quite a bit. I wanted to move straight across, but I'm actually moving across and up, and you can see the direction that I'm aimed. So the tactical overlay is extremely useful. There's an arrow there also indicating. You can also see the arrow when players are warping off. Makes it a little bit easier to try to track them down. So let me redo this. So with the tactical overlay, I'm able to retain my position vertically and move straight across. Not that that's necessarily important, but it's just an example or demonstrating what the tactical overlay can do for you. You may think you don't like it, it just kind of clutters up the screen, but I highly recommend you enable it and just leave it enabled. You'll get used to it, you'll learn to love it, and eventually you will feel naked without it. Let me see if now it just occurred to me that the ship label has not yet kicked in from the overview. Sometimes the ship label won't work right away, and you need to sort of reset your overview, and you can do that by docking. And so we go to my general. I'm going to go ahead and
docking permission requested.
Dock and then undock, and then we should be able to use the ship label to view other ships. And let's see here. There we go. So now I've selected this guy, and you can see the ship information is a lot different. We see the name and white at the top, the type of ship that they're in, and how far away they are from us. So this will be the same for any player. So if I mouse over here, you can see them highlighted very quickly and easily on the screen. So it really makes it convenient, the ship label, for quickly identifying other players that are near you. So is this a player? Is this an NPC? Mouse over, immediately you can see it's a player. You don't even have to click and check to see if there's a player icon there. Okay, so next up, I think I would like to cover the drones, or the drone window rather. And so let's go to the drone window. By default, it's going to look something like this. You'll have your, or it may be minimized. You can also minimize. You probably want to keep these maximized though. And you'll see a group of drones in here when they're in your drone bay, and then when they're in space, you'll see the drones down here, as well as in space around you. Now, you can do Shift L to launch all of your drones. And you can also drag each individual drone out like this, and then you can also drag them back up like this to bring them back, or you could also do Shift R to recall. However, I recommend that you get used to using drone groups because most people don't fly around with just 2 drones in their ship. Most people have drone groups. They may have 3, even 4 different drone groups. The way you do that is you simply right click any drone, select move drone, and then you can either create a new group or move it into an existing group. In this case, I've already created a group called Hobgoblin-Heat, and by doing that we now have a folder for that Hobgoblin, and I'm going to go ahead and drag the other one up in there as well. And, oh, actually that's the wrong one. This one down into there. I'm going to minimize this folder, and now if I want to bring the drones out, I can left click the folder, drag it to space, and launch all of the drones in the folder at once. And I usually leave this open so that I can see the drones that I have in space. And note, when I mouse over, they're highlighted as well in the ship label, or when I click on them, simply because they are player-owned drones. So I recommend this because eventually you're going to have multiple drone groups, and that way you can pick the group that you want to launch and then simply drag it into space. Another option you'll want to select for drones is here. You'll want to set them to aggressive and focus fire. By setting them to aggressive, it means they will on their own go out and attack anyone that attacks you. So assuming they're launched. This won't happen if they're still in your drone bay. So set to aggressive and focus fire. Okay, so we're going to look at this next. There can be quite a bit of information up here, including mission panels and faction status. So it's in your best interest to minimize all of this as much as possible. By default, it will show you your route and your nearest location, the faction status of the system that you are in, and your current location. I'm going to go ahead and set a destination real quick just so we can see what that looks like. So I'm going to go to people and places, and then I'm going to do a search for a nearby hub. Dodixie, search, And let's see, I don't want characters, I want stations, and specifically I want this station. So I'm going to right click the station and then set destination, and you can see we have some additional information over here. So our route shows us our next jump, which is this system, and our final destination, which is this system, and all of the systems in between. And you can mouse over each one of these and it will show you next, which is the same as this, and final, which is the same as this, and also the system security of each one of these locations. So if you're not sure if it's going to be high sec or low sec, you can quickly check here. You can also choose to prefer safer, stay in 0.5 to 1.0 where possible. So sometimes this means taking a longer journey, however it will keep you in high sec. You can also select less security and or shorter route and ignore your own security status, or ignore security status of routes and systems, and you can see there's some options in here. As a rookie, I recommend that you keep it on prefer safer, and do note that just because you have selected prefer safer doesn't mean that you're going to completely avoid a low sec. It could be that in order to get from point A to point B, you have to go through low sec. Or it could be that maybe the system that has designed the route for you just failed or didn't do it very well. Now you can toggle all of this information as well. So, for example, there's a if you mouse over just to the left of the A, you'll see this little triangle. If you click it, it minimizes all of this and it simply shows you your next destination on the route. And you can do the same up here. So we see our nearest location and faction of the space that we're in now. You can simply click the little triangle and now that's also minimized. And you can also customize what will appear once you have minimized and maximized this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the nearest sector or nearest item because I can already see what's near to me over here anyway, and this is just taking up a little bit extra space that I don't need. To do that, just left click the sun and select configure, and then you see here nearest / docked in is selected and sovereignty is selected. I'm going to deselect this. Okay, and now all we see is the sovereignty of the system that we're in. So what I like to do is I like to keep this minimized and I like to keep this open. And I'm going to have another window here, and the window is going to come up and cover up to right about here. And that works well for me. It may not work well for you. You may want to have some other items over here, but for my purposes it works pretty well. And it keeps everything tidy over here as well. So with that in mind, alright, let me check my notes. The next thing we're going to go over is we're going to add a new window. And the window we're going to add is the D-scan window. You can access it with Alt-D. And actually, let me fix this. When you press Alt-D, it's going to look like this for you, more than likely. And you'll see this little window, and then you'll see a map on here. And we're going to kind of ignore this for right now. And then we're going to, if you click right here, it'll separate this window, and this is what we're after. So we'll separate that. Now we can close this. And I want this window right on top of chat. So I'm going to drag it over, resize it, and then I'm going to bring this down to right about there. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm covering up this bottom part, but I know the destination that I entered, so I don't need to see it. And if I do need to see it, I can always mouse over the last one because it's the same location anyway. And that allows me to get just a little bit of extra room in here, so I have a larger D-scan. Do I want to go over D-scan? This is really a tutorial on setting up your user interface. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a bonus segment at the end of the video and talk a little bit about D-scan. For now, trust me when I say you always want to have DScan visible. This is one of the few windows that you don't really want to get used to not using. You can't really get away with it. This will keep you alive, especially if you spend a lot of time in wormhole space. So if you don't want it here, have it somewhere, but just get used to having DScan open somewhere on your screen. For me, I like it right over here. Okay, so I want to have another window here as well, and specifically I want my notepad. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my notepad, and I find notepad to be extremely convenient. I use it all the time. However, I don't want to have it here and taking up room. I want it to be in the same place, this. So you can merge two windows together and it'll create a tab for it. So all you do is left click and move the window you want to move, and mouse over the header of the other window, and when that other header highlights, you can release and you can basically merge it. So now if I click this tab, I have my directional scanner, and if I click this tab, I have my notepad. Notepad's pretty convenient. You can obviously type notes. You can click new note, and I'll just add a miscellaneous note. You don't have to click save. Anything you enter in here is automatically saved. You can type anything you want. You can also drag links in there. You can drag player links in there. So I could drag this guy, and then if I wanted to have him as a reference, or her, or whoever, I have it. You can also drag links to items in here. I like to keep links to systems that I travel to often in here. So, for example, we'll go to people and places again, and I'll do another search for Dodixie. And instead of right-clicking, this time I'm going to double-click to bring up the info panel for the station. And now I can left-click here and drag, and I can create a link to that station. I can share that in chat, or I can right-click and set a destination. So there's a lot you can do with the notepad, and I find myself using it a lot. Some people will also dock their people and places somewhere, but for me, I tend to just keep my most common systems in here bookmarked, or not bookmarked, but saved, and then I can right-click. Of course, you can also just bring up your people and places, and you'll have locations in here that you can also save for future reference, and then set a destination to them. Okay, so let's see. The other window you will probably want is your probe scanner window. That is Alt P, and actually I already had it undocked. Let me do this real quick. So when you hit Alt P, it's going to look like this, very similar to the DScan. You'll have a window, and then you'll have a smaller window. This is the one we're after. We'll undock it, close the map, and in this case I'm going to merge it over here with this one. So now I have drones and probe scanner, and I find this works well because if I need my probe scanner, I don't necessarily need to be looking at my drones tab, and if I need my drones tab open, I don't necessarily need to be looking at the probe scanner. So I find this to work pretty well for me. Note you can also undock something. Just left click the tab and then drag it out. I could merge it with my chat window if I wanted as well. So you can pretty much set this out however you like. And if you haven't used the probe scanner yet, then do the Explorer Career Agent. To find your nearest agent, you just hit F12 and then select here Show Career Agents, and then it will show you the nearest career agents. And the one you want to talk to is Exploration. This could be a different person. It depends on where you're located. But you want to do these career agent missions. There's only 5 of them, and it is confusing. However, it's very much worth it. I will briefly mention that your probe scanner will show you signatures and anomalies. A signature is something that you know is there, but you don't know exactly where it is, so you can't just fly to it. You have to use this process to scan this down to 100%. It's currently at 0%, and once you get it to 100%, then you can warp to it. And you can compare that to an anomaly. An anomaly is a green site. In other words, it's already at 100%. You don't have to scan it down, and you can go to it immediately simply by clicking here to warp to it. So sometimes you can find asteroid belts, like this one right here. So I'll bring up the asteroids, and you can see these are showing 4 belts in the system. Rookie systems tend to get mined out pretty quickly, and there's a real good chance that all of these sites are completely devoid of asteroids. And if that's the case, I would be looking for another system. However, you could look at your probe scanner, and if you find a hidden asteroid belt like this one or this one, then you can simply, oh, actually that's a training site. That's an asteroid belt. Then you can just warp to it, and you could mine there instead. Okay, so we're nearing the end, and I want to go over a couple of more things. The first one being this little notifications icon right here. If you left click and hold for about a half a second, you'll see it swell up, and then you can move it. And I like to keep mine right here in this corner, something like that. It's can be a bit hard to place sometimes due to the fact that it does change size. So something like that I think works. And by having it over here, I find that it's out of the way, and I can still see when I have notifications, and I can also access them. Yours might not be opening to the right and to the bottom. It might be opening to the right and then up. And if you want to change that, simply click here and then click the settings, and then you'll see an option over here to control the expansion. So in my case, it's going to the right and down. You'll see some other options in here too. This lets you choose which type of notifications to receive. Okay, and I think the last thing I want to show you is how to pin your windows. So sometimes in the heat of battle, you're moving your mouse around and clicking a lot of things. You might accidentally do this or resize something, and you can solve that problem by clicking here to pin a window. And you may notice that it's moving anyway, and that's because there's another setting that we have to adjust in order to convince Eve that we want it to recognize when a window is pinned. So for that, hit escape, and I think it's under general settings on the left side here. It says lock windows when pinned. So if you select that and then close, now we should be pinned. Actually, I think everything automatically pins when you click that. So if you do want to move something, then you could click to unpin it, and then that would allow you to move the window. Pin it, and now we can't move it again. Okay, and that's it. And I can already tell that my voice is going out, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bonus here with the D-Scan. If you haven't used D-Scan yet, I'm going to show you the easy way to use it. There are some old pros out there that are really good at D-Scan, and they can use it to find you and come kill you. So it's kind of good if you know how to use this. So D-Scan allows you to see things that are far removed from you, versus primarily other players, versus ordinarily you can only see them when they're somewhat near to you. So actually, let me just go to the ships alone. So we have like 3 individuals that are near us at the station, but there could be far more in the system. And if we look at the local chat here, it says 78. So we know there's 78 in the system, even though there's only a few near to us. However, with D-Scan, we can see but not necessarily pinpoint where they're located. You have a max range of 14.3 AU, astronomical units. And you can set your angle here between 5 degrees and 360 degrees. And simply by changing one of these will automatically make it rescan. So the way this works is the direction you're looking when you scan indicates the direction that's being scanned. So I chose 180 degrees. Actually, let me say 60 degrees. So I'm now searching in this direction in a roughly a 60 degree cone. And nothing's appearing there, which means that there are no ships within 14.3 astronomical units. If you want a visual of this, I'll click the map and zoom in, and you can see we're here. Actually, where are we? Oh, we're right here near the station, and this cone is the direction we're scanning in. If I change this, you'll see the cone shape change, and I can go all the way down to 5 degrees for a more precise way of looking for other players or objects if you want. Now let me do this real quick. For you, you're probably not just seeing other players. You're probably seeing everything, something like this. And when you're seeing everything, there's a lot of stuff, especially if you're scanning 360 degrees. So what you'll want to do is set a filter for your D-scan so that you're only specifically searching for something more specific. So as an example, if I click on here, I can choose active overview filters. If I select this, now whatever overview tab I have selected is what's going to appear over here. So for example, I can go to general and then scan, and now we'll see a bunch of actually that's not quite right. Oh, actually it is quite right, because a cargo scanner or a cargo container would appear on here, but we're not seeing it here because we're too far away from it, but we are seeing it on here. So if we only want to see asteroids, then I could click the asteroids tab, scan again, and now we're only going to see asteroids. And it just so happens that containers are also set to appear in asteroid belts. So what I recommend you do, though, is rather than choose to have the active overview filtered, is I recommend you scroll down and choose ships. That way you will only be seeing other players when you use D-scan. Also note you can adjust these. Do something like this. So we have type, name, distance. Give a little bit more. Let me do something like that. So then you have the name of the in this case, if it's a player, then it's the name of their ship. It's not the name of the player. Whereas over here, we'll see the name of the player, not the ship. And then the type of item it is, and then how far away it is. D-scan filter should be set to ships. That's my recommendation. Of course, you can set it to anything you want. And so that's D-scan. Now, what a lot of players will do if they enter a system and maybe they're looking for miners, well, that's pretty easy to do, because all they have to do is bring up their asteroids tab, look for belts that are within the max distance of 14.3, bring the angle down to 5 degrees, click one of these, hit the C key, which will track it, meaning you're now looking at it, and then hit the V key to scan, and nothing came up, so I know that there aren't any miners or any players in that asteroid belt. Now, the problem with these is that they're all right next to each other. So if I selected this one and then hit C and then hit V, or I could also just scan, as indicated here if you hit the V, or you can click here and it will scan it. Now I have a couple of guys and one guy in a venture, but I don't know which one of these asteroid belts they're in. And it could be that there's more stuff there as well. And there's also a customs office, and there is also a planet. Sometimes when you look at the distance of these objects, you can adjust it, and then you can adjust the distance that you scan to differentiate and try to pinpoint where someone is located. And what was I going to say here? Oh, and just a reminder, the direction you scan in is the direction you're looking. It is not the direction that your ship is facing. So if I look in this direction and I scan, I'm scanning in this direction. If I look in this direction and I scan, I'm scanning in this direction. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and end it there. And a couple of last minute tips. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to lose your ship. If you're in a ship, assume you're going to lose it anyway. If you don't, then it's just an added bonus. And don't fly safe. Everybody says fly safe. I think you should fly dangerously.